Welcome back here in the Big Tire Garage. It's time for another one of our weekly Q&A sessions based on what questions were asked on the last behind the scenes weekly update vlog style video. Now, if you don't remember, here's how it works. You go on the video, you comment. If I like your question, I'm gonna select it. I'm gonna answer it here on one of these other videos. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna give you, well, it's not gonna give you a chance to win. You're actually gonna get one of our Big Tire Garage sticker packs, which includes the Bad Old Wagon, the Big Tire Garage, and the Lockjaw sticker. And then if I get more stickers made, we'll add them in there as we go. Now, last week I answered 4 questions. And remember, if you hear your name here or you see the comment on the YouTube video, make sure you're paying attention to that. I'm gonna send you basically a request to get your mailing address so I can send you out those stickers. So this week, I chose 3 questions, all very different and pretty cool. So let's start with question number 1. Question number 1 comes from Amber and Randy Stuffle. How exhausting is the ultimate adventure after being out for a week straight? Now let's start at the beginning. What is Ultimate Adventure? Well, Ultimate Adventure is a trip that was basically created by a magazine that used to work underneath the brand of Peterson Publishing. Now, at that time, a gentleman by the name of Rick Payway, who's kind of like an OG at the magazine. If you don't know who Rick is, you should look him up. He's a super cool cat. So he came up with this idea to go out and just go on a trip, drive as many road miles and hit as many trails as you can in a week and just have a great trip. And the first Ultimate Adventure was pretty crazy. I think it went from like LA all the way up into British Columbia, Canada, which is absolutely insane. So that was like 23 years ago. Now, in the past 23 years, they've put this same event on every year. And it has been copied by everybody, including me, on my old TV show. The idea of doing a bunch of road miles and hitting a bunch of off-road parks or hitting a bunch of trails, it's just a great combination. The idea was kind of like similar to Power Tour at the time to prove that, hey, these trucks, they work great off-road, but you can also drive them on the road and have some fun with them. They're not just trailer queens, which, you know, a well-built off-road rig can handle some on-road driving as well. And yes, like I said, it's been copied by everybody, but nobody ever comes close to what Ultimate Adventure is. Ultimate Adventure was definitely a bucket list for me. I could never go on it because I worked for a different company that was basically a competitor to the Petersons, which then became Source Interlink, which then became 10, which now became Motor Trend. And so I used to work for a different company, and so I wasn't allowed to go on Ultimate Adventure. But in 2018, when I left that company and started out on my own, the cool thing was that was one of the first things I was able to do. I was able to participate in Ultimate Adventure, and I was stoked. I went as a representative for Rugged Radios. We went up to New England and had a blast. It was so much fun being on Ultimate Adventure, to the point where if I can get invited to go back every year, it's the one trip that I'm definitely gonna go on. So what Ultimate Adventure is you have no idea where you're going, like not even where you're going in the United States. You're told almost a month out where the start is, where the end is, and what hotels you need to book. You don't stay in hotels all the time. There's like a combo of like a hotel night and then a camp night and then sometimes another hotel night and then a couple nights camping and then you end in a hotel. So you get to mix that up. And it's just basically a super cool trip. It's not the hardest four-wheeling. They don't hit the hardest trails. They just hit some of the most iconic trails in the area. You get to see some amazing back roads. You spend almost 0 time on the interstate unless it's absolutely necessary. And you get to just hang out with like 20 to 25 other cool folks, driving cool off-road rigs and having fun. And the mix of people is also pretty unique. I've been lucky, I've gone on a lot of these trips. And all of them, none of them have basically captured the lightning in the bottle that is Ultimate Adventure. So with Ultimate Adventure, we get a combination of OG cronies. These are the guys that have been on the trip forever. They're there as support. They're there as additional trail guides. They're there, if you break down on the side of the road, they will stop. They're not there to help you. They're just there to stop, make sure you can keep going where you're going. So that's their job. And then you've got sponsors. So you've got some sponsors, and some of these guys have been there 10, 12 years. Companies like Off-Road Designs, Stephen Watson, you know, they basically prove that their parts are made for this type of abuse. And it's kind of like a feather in your cap if you're a sponsor and you get to sponsor Ultimate Adventure, because the cool thing is it's not just like, oh, here's some parts and we're gonna write you a check. But there's vehicles from that company on the trip running those parts, and they're being beat down for a week on this trip. And then you've got invited, they still call them readers, even though there's really no magazine that backs this up anymore. It's pretty much all digital on the Motor Trend network. but we'll still call them readers. So there's still people who apply, and they invite 4 or 5 invited readers every year, and they're just people who just get to come on the trip and have a good time. It's that combination that makes it super fun. What makes it amazing is 2 people. So at this point, it's kind of run by Christian Hazel and Trent McGee. Now, I dub them the Walter White and Jesse Pinkman of Ultimate Adventure. Christian just basically says to Trent, this is where I want to go in America. And then Trent goes in and plans some of the most amazing routes you'll ever go on. And they are fun. They really are. It's an awesome mix of back roads, museums, Americana, history, off-roading. It's just, I cannot stress how amazing a job that Trent and Christian do for this trip. It can't be expressed enough how amazing a job these guys do. So how exhausting is Ultimate Adventure? Well, I'm going to have a sip of coffee because this is going to be an even longer description. So yes, Ultimate Adventure is exhausting. What's actually more exhausting is the fact that up to Ultimate Adventure, you're basically just slogging to get your rig ready. You know, you got to plan for everything. You got to plan for miles and miles and miles of roads, off-road trails. You have no idea where you're going to go or what you're going to do. How many spare parts are you going to bring? Do you bring all your spare parts? That's a lot of stuff you got to bring with you. Like what do you do? I am fortunate enough that for the 2nd year in a row this year, I'm actually building a vehicle again for Ultimate Adventure, and I'm building it for Real Truck, the title sponsor. And so I'm putting together a truck that I'm starting to sneak up on what I think is the perfect Ultimate Adventure rig. And then this year, it'll prove me wrong because, you know, first year I took the shop truck in 18, 19 I didn't get to go because that was Alaska. 20, I went back and I took my Throwdown Ultra 4 race car because I thought, well, hey, because in 18 we hit a lot of cool hardcore stuff. And so in 20, I took the Goat Built LJ that I built on a 4-wheeler. Huge mistake. I brought an atomic bomb to a knife fight. We did 1,300 road miles, and I'm driving a 42-inch red label sticky, basically Ultra 4 car with coilovers, bypasses, full-on race car stuff with a turbo 400, 540-something gears in it. Things turning like 3,500 on the highway, and my transmission is hating life the entire trip. And then on the trails that we went on, they were scenically beautiful in Montana, but honestly, I didn't even put the truck in 4-wheel drive until the very last day. I ran 90% of Ultimate Adventure in 20 in 2-wheel drive, and I had to like let everyone get ahead of me and then like blast through because the suspension on that truck, it doesn't start to work until like 30, 35 miles an hour. So it's just riding like a buckboard unless I'm blasting through some of these trails. And then, like I said, I had transmission overheating issues, so it was a huge issue. So then last year I thought, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll just build a truck that would have been perfect for that trip. Then I took the JK, built it for Rugged Ridge, chopped it in half, stretched it, made like a 4-door little short bed, kind of, we call it the Javalanche because it looked like an avalanche. Kept it on a small tire, left 44s on it, and then it turns into a throwdown hardcore rock crawling trip where we only do 200 miles. Killing me. So this year I think I maybe got a good combination. We'll find out when we show up on the first day. So how tiring is it? It's incredibly tiring because you're spending so much time, like I said, getting your rig ready. It's tiring because they kind of plan it that way. You know, you'll sometimes be, an hour from your campsite and it'll be 4 o'clock at night. And Trent will take you on like the Star of David tour of some of these back roads where you're just driving around where you're going to stop just so you get to camp like pitch black. And it's planned. I know what they're doing and I understand it, but that wears you out. So the best way to describe it was Chris Durham said it to me one time in 18 when we went. About halfway through the week, you're kind of like, man, I just want to get into camp at a good time, hang out, have some adult beverages, sit by the fire, cook a good meal, and just relax. But you can't because you're not going to get there till 10 o'clock at night, setting up tent in the dark. And we were all sitting around in 18 basically having that same conversation. And Chris Durham said the same thing. He goes, listen, right now you hate this trip because it's wearing you out. But on the last day, I'm going to tell you right now, if Trent called you up and said, hey, we're leaving on another Ultimate Adventure tomorrow, are you in? You would go. And it's true. It's one of those situations where during it, there's times where you're just burned out. But at the same time, when you get near the end and even near the beginning, you have such an amazing experience that it can't be replaced with anything else. So Is it tiring? Yes. Is it worth it to be that tired? No questions asked. It's the greatest trip I've ever been able to go on, and I'm so glad I get to go back again this year. And I'll go as long as they keep inviting me. As long as I get to go back, I'm going to keep showing up. So there you go. Thank you very much, Amber and Randy Stuffel. Make sure to send me your address. I'll get those stickers out to you. Here we go. Question number 2. Question number 2 is from CJ Leon. Love the new video design and the back post on YouTube. How about giving us an overview of that VW Type 1? I know it has some history with you and being an owner of a 74 myself. I would love to have a closer look, hear the backstory and what's been done to it, and any further plans for it. Looking forward to the next video. Thanks. Well, CJ, a lot of people know the story of my VW Type 1 that you see kicking around in the back of the shop, but here it is. This is what it is. That's my first car. My very first car was a 75 Volkswagen. I bought it when I was basically 15 years old for $500. I came home from work, told my dad that I phoned a guy in the Auto Trader and bought a Bug, and we needed to go pick it up. He borrowed a car trailer from a friend of ours. We went and picked it up and hauled it home. I don't know why I wanted a Bug. I still remember as a kid basically walking into a magazine store in Smiths Falls, Ontario, Canada, middle of nowhere, and seeing a VW Trends or a Hot VWs magazine on the magazine rack, buying it and absolutely falling in love with that car. And I knew that was going to be my first car. No idea why. I still don't know. I will say this. That car is the reason I became a mechanic. That 75 VW was the biggest piece of crap I've ever owned in my entire life. And I buy a lot of pieces of crap. But if I had bought a reliable, good daily driver car for my first car, I never would have become a mechanic because that car broke down. So then I signed up for high school auto shop, realized how much I love turning wrenches on cars because I didn't come from a blue collar family. Both my parents, they were white collar folks. My dad did some carpentry work. He built a lot of the houses that we lived in. So he was like a carpentry type of guy, which is awesome. But I was never exposed to car stuff by anybody in my family. And so I really didn't know that that's what I wanted to do till I signed up for grade 10 auto shop, took that class, and I was like, this is what I absolutely love to do. So the car basically made me into who I am today as a mechanic. The actual physical vehicle that's here is not that 1975. That 1975, when I was like 18 years old, I decided that, I'm going to restore this car. And if you're 18 years old, you don't have the budget and or the skills to restore a car, so I should never have done it. I started taking it apart. When I found the fifth street sign pop riveted into the floor of that 75 Volkswagen Type 1, I realized maybe this car isn't worth saving. I had already built a motor for it in my high school auto shop. I already had a bunch of parts gathered up for this big rebuild that I had planned. I ended up selling them to a friend of mine, and we basically turned his car into the car that I kind of wanted because his car was in a lot better shape, and we basically built up the VW Type 1 that is sitting right here. So I say it's like half my first car because I did work on this when I was a teenager, and it has all the parts that I bought when I was like literally bought these when I was 15, 16 years old. So I say it has the soul of my first car because it does. It's got the heart plant, the heart was in it, the transplant went in it, the engine was in it, body panels were on it, all that kind of stuff. Fast forward a few years, I get married. My wife and I are talking. This is back in '99, so I'm like just under 30 maybe. We're or 26, I guess. 25, 26, we're talking about getting married. We're getting married. My wife and I are talking about, hey, this is why I became a mechanic, because this car, the history, blah, blah. She finds the car, we buy the car, I come home from the honeymoon, the car's there. So basically I got the car back. I've been working on it on and off. Then I get the job offer to do TV down in Nashville. Boom, next thing you know, I'm down in Nashville making TV. The car sits in Canada in storage for a few years. I then move it down here a few years later, blah, blah, blah. Here it is, it's down here. And I work on it occasionally. My son helped me work on it in the garage when he was 13, 14, basically just learning to turn wrenches on cars. And that's where it sits. And it still sits here. And it has a bunch of work done to it. It's got air ride all the way around. It's got custom built suspension front and rear. I never liked how the Bugs, when you put air ride on them, the IRS Bugs, or even the swing axle Bugs, the tires would basically give a lot of camber when they laid it out. So I built some custom trailing arms for the back. So it has 0 camber change up and down, which I really, really like. It's got big wide tires, 3-inch over fenders, 39 Ford taillights in the back, custom paint by Kevin Tates. That's fake patina on it. The car is rust free at this point. And he made it look like it was a worn out old car, which is amazing. And my son and I built the engine for it. We have a 2276 sitting on an engine stand ready to go in it. And I've got a heavy duty gearbox already installed and the suspension's done. And that leads us to the next part of his question is, what are the plans for it? Well, the plans for it are just to finish it. I mean, it's one of those things where I got it to the point where I get a lot of vehicles too, and I just get burned out and stop. And that was at the point of sheet metal. I got to completely redo the sheet metal in the back of the car. Now that I've done the wagon and done my two-door Gladiator, I'm not as afraid of bodywork anymore. So that's what I'm going to tackle. I just need to find a little bit of time. My goal is to drive it on my birthday next year, because that's a pretty big birthday for me. So my goal is to drive it on that birthday. And I think that'll be super, super cool to get that done, get it driving. So this fall, I'm probably going to jump back on it and do a bunch of work on it. But that's the story of the Type 1. I absolutely love that car. That car is never going anywhere. Even if I never finish it, it's not going anywhere. I don't care. I'll push it around the shop to the day I die. And that's just what that car is. So there you go. There's a question about the Type 1. I hope you guys enjoyed that. So thanks again. So here we go. Question number 3. Question number 3, Ian, is from Desert RC. Ian, serious question. He's asking a serious question. I seriously think the world as a whole is making the swap to EVs. Do you think that they have a place in the off-road hobby? If you were to build an EV crawler, what would you use? Also, please do make a real EV off-road build. And that is Desert RC. So EVs get a lot of hate, and I don't get it, to be honest with you. Everyone I know that hates on EVs hasn't driven an EV. So put aside all the politics, which I'm not going to get into. Put aside all the, our grid's not built for this, because it could be. There's just people making decisions that don't want it to be. So let's put that aside. Let's just compare apples to apples, gas car, EV car. EVs are coming. Do I think that they will be a 100% replacement for the internal combustion engine? Absolutely not. Do I think they're cool? Oh, hell yeah, I do. I think they are super cool. My wife drives an EV, and she hasn't bought gas in 3 years. Well, I take it back. She bought gas once. It was $1.60. But there's a Harley driving by. But the car is cool. It's got amazing torque. It's so much fun to drive. And yeah, the argument is, well, what do you do about distance? What do you do about charging, range anxiety? I get all of that. I think the infrastructure is coming. Let me use a comparison for you. Here you go. So when fuel injection first came into the world, all right, so fuel injection launches and starts showing up in OEMs. That was in like late 80s, early 90s. I remember we were getting cars at the dealer. I was working at the GM dealer at the time in the late 80s, early 90s that had on them these things called C3 carburetors, computer-controlled carburetor. They were garbage, terrible. Car wouldn't run, the computer didn't work right. We were taking those off and replacing them with regular quadrajets and just deleting the C3 carburetor. The next round of EFI was not as good, but it was a little bit better. And it slowly, incrementally got better until, in the late 90s, early 2000s, we get the LS1, which is insane. Compare the LS1, the first generation LS1, to a C3 carburetor that was like 15 years prior, and it's like rocket science difference, right? So what makes the difference? That was a huge gap in time, but it accelerated so fast, right? It went from garbage to awesome in literally 15 years, which is not a lot of time when you think about it. The EVs are doing the same thing. First generation EVs were trash. Second generation EVs were better. The next generation is getting even better. And every time an OEM jumps in and builds another EV, they're just getting better and better and better and better. And the battery technology is there. And I think the EV side is nailed. The engines are great. The motors. The motors are great. You have lots of options with motors. You've got lots of options with inverters and speed controls and all that kind of stuff. The battery technology is what's going to leap and bound change over the next few years. Do I think there's a place for it in off-road? Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a place for it in off-road. I think we will see more and more EVs coming into the off-road scene. I think we'll see hub motor vehicles out on trails. I think we'll see basic electric motors at every single tire. Do you have range anxiety when you're off-road? Maybe. But when you think about it, if I'm at the Hammers, do I really drive 300 miles? No, I drive, maybe 100 miles in a weekend. If I had enough battery power to get it to drive 100 miles, I'd probably have enough to last a weekend. There's technology out there that solves all the other range anxiety issues. There's tow to charge. So now we're in a situation where some of the OEMs are looking at, all right, so if the car breaks down, what do? Well, it's simple. You hook it up to another vehicle and you tow it and it charges itself, because they're all designed to do that. But do I think that EVs are going to replace everything? No. I think that we're going to see another fuel source pop up out of nowhere, whether that's hydrogen or methane, who knows? Could be hydrogen's probably what's on everyone's list right now. Hydrogen will be the next big thing that will replace gasoline and internal combustion engines. So I do still think we're going to have internal combustion engines. Will we have gasoline? Probably not. I think there will be somebody that just comes out with a magic elixir that we can keep all of our internal combustion engines and that still have good emissions, and yet then still have an EV. So am I a fan of EVs? 100%, and you can hate me for it if you want to, but that's just the way I think. I also look at, if everyone who just drove a car as a form of utility, who don't necessarily they don't want a car like the rest of us, like some of us want cars, like I want cars. There's lots of people out there who they just have to get back and forth to work. If all of them drove an EV, our gas consumption in this country would just bottom out, it would crater. And then there's a chance that gasoline would become even cheaper because nobody would want it. And there's lots of thought processes like that. It's not a black and a white answer. I think it's a lot of gray, and I think it's going to be pretty cool. Please plan a real EV off-road build. Well, I am. I have a Tesla drive unit sitting here. It's been scanned. All that information has been sent off to the guys at DIY Off-Road that did my trailing arms. And they have drawn me a whole front end for a long travel off-road VW thing. They're working on the belly pan and the Y-frame in the back with provisions for that Tesla drivetrain to go in it. So my plan is to have a Tesla-powered long travel VW thing, which I think will be super cool. And that's where I'm going to start, and then I'm going to start chasing down the crawler road as well. I think that it's worth looking at, and it's definitely going to be something cool in the future. I look at it as like a challenge. I think it's cool. I think it's something new and something neat. And if we all just clung to old tech, we'd still be running propane mixers on top of small block Chevys. Nobody does that anymore. At one point in time, we all did that. We threw all that away and replaced it with LS1s and other OEM fuel injection systems that just became so much better. And I think we're going to see the same thing with EV. Plus, you got sanctioning bodies like Ultra 4 Racing really pushing the envelope of EV. Then you've got Formula One doing EV stuff, other people doing EV. I think we're going to see a lot of cool stuff happen in the next 5 to 10 years with EV, and I'm excited for it. So there you go, guys. Those are your 3 answers this week. Thank you so much for tuning into this. Remember, if you don't subscribe and hit the notification bell and all that kind of stuff. Be another behind the scenes video coming out later on this week, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.